Most people spend their entire lives watching others, studying their moods, chasing their approval, fearing their silence, and reacting to their behavior. Yet very few ever stop to watch themselves, and this is exactly where suffering begins, because the moment you abandon your inner world to manage the emotions of others, you silently hand over your peace, your power, and your identity. And both Stoic philosophy and Carl Jung warned us about this long before modern relationships turned into emotional battlegrounds, because the Stoics understood that anything outside your control cannot be the foundation of your happiness, and Jung understood that when a person does not build a relationship with the self, they will desperately seek completion through others, turning love into dependency and connection into captivity. And this is why the command to be obsessed with yourself is not narcissism but survival, not ego but awareness, not selfishness but sovereignty. Because a person who does not know themselves will bleed on people who did not cut them, and a person who does not master their inner world will always feel powerless in the outer one. And so relationships today collapse not because love is rare, but because self-knowledge is, because people enter bonds hoping to be saved, validated, healed, and completed, when in truth no human being was ever meant to carry the weight of another person's unexamined soul. And the Stoics would say that expectation is the fastest way to enslave yourself emotionally, because the moment you expect someone to behave a certain way, you surrender your tranquility to their choices. And Jung would add that what we demand from others often reveals what we have refused to give ourselves. And so when someone fears abandonment, it is often because they have already abandoned themselves. When someone begs for attention, it is because they do not sit comfortably in their own presence. And when someone becomes obsessed with being chosen, it is because they have not chosen themselves. And this is why becoming deeply focused on your own growth, your own discipline, your own inner alignment is the most loving thing you can do for every relationship you will ever have. Because when you are rooted in yourself, you do not cling, you do not chase, you do not manipulate, and you do not beg. You observe, you choose, and you walk away when your peace is threatened. And this is the quiet power the Stoics called inner freedom, the ability to remain whole regardless of external chaos. Because the world will always be unpredictable, people will always be inconsistent, emotions will always fluctuate, but the person who has cultivated a strong inner center does not collapse every time reality refuses to cooperate with their desires. And Jung warned that the greatest danger is unconsciousness, because what we do not confront within ourselves will appear outside us as fate, meaning the same patterns, the same disappointments, the same heartbreaks will repeat again and again until we learn the lesson they are trying to teach. And most people never do, because learning requires stillness, honesty, and the courage to look inward. And stillness terrifies a world addicted to noise. Honesty threatens egos built on illusion, and self-examination destroys the fantasy that our pain is always someone else's fault. And so instead of doing the inner work, people monitor text replies, analyze tone changes, stalk social media, and mentally rehearse conversations that will never happen, exhausting themselves emotionally while calling it love, when in reality it is anxiety disguised as attachment. And the Stoics would calmly remind us that peace comes not from controlling others, but from controlling our judgments about others. And Jung would whisper that when we project our unmet needs onto people, we turn them into mirrors of our own wounds, and then punish them for reflecting what we refuse to heal. And this is why obsession with yourself is not about vanity, but about responsibility. The responsibility to know your triggers, your fears, your patterns, your shadows, because until you do, every relationship will feel unstable, every silence will feel threatening, and every disagreement will feel personal, and you will live in a constant state of emotional reaction instead of conscious response. And the Stoics believed that the wise person responds slowly, not because they are indifferent, but because they understand that emotional impulsivity is a form of slavery. And Jung believed that maturity begins when a person realizes that not every emotion deserves action, and not every thought deserves belief. And so when you become deeply invested in your own inner development, something profound happens. You stop seeking validation and start cultivating value. You stop needing attention and start commanding respect. You stop fearing loss and start honoring alignment, because you understand that anything that requires you to betray yourself in order to keep it was never meant to be kept. And this is why people often leave your life when you start choosing yourself, because your growth exposes their comfort in your self-neglect, and your boundaries threaten their access to your energy. And the Stoics would say, let them go without resentment, because resentment is simply emotional attachment to injustice. And Jung would say, let them go without bitterness, because bitterness is the refusal to accept reality as it is. And so the person obsessed with themselves does not argue, does not chase explanations, does not beg for closure. They observe patterns, accept truth, and move forward with dignity, because they know that clarity is more valuable than connection, peace more valuable than passion, and self-respect more valuable than being chosen. And this is the paradox most people never understand, that the more you detach from needing others to complete you, the healthier your relationships become, because you approach them from abundance instead of lack, choice instead of fear, and freedom instead of dependence. And the Stoics taught that love should be voluntary, not compulsory, and Jung taught that love should allow the other person to remain whole, not become a solution to your emptiness. And so when you truly become centered in yourself, relationships transform from emotional lifelines into shared journeys. And if they end, you grieve without losing yourself. You remember without returning to suffering, and you move forward without closing your heart. Because obsession with yourself does not harden you, it stabilizes you. It does not isolate you, it grounds you. And it does not make you selfish, it makes you sovereign. And sovereignty is the foundation of all healthy love, because only a complete individual can choose connection without desperation, and only a self-aware individual can love without possession, and only a disciplined mind can remain calm when others are chaotic. And so the invitation is simple but difficult. Turn your attention inward. Study yourself with the same intensity you once studied others. Invest your energy where it multiplies instead of where it drains. Build a relationship with your mind so strong that silence no longer scares you, and solitude no longer feels like rejection. Because when you finally learn how to sit with yourself, without escaping, without numbing, without seeking distraction, you unlock a freedom that no relationship can give and no loss can take away. And this is the quiet truth both the Stoics and Carl Jung agreed on, that the person who masters themselves becomes untouchable, not because nothing hurts them, but because nothing controls them. And in a world obsessed with others, the most radical act of wisdom is to finally come home to yourself.